Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Mufti. Since we last spoke, anti-Muslim rhetoric has been on the rise, and in some parts of the globe, it's actually gotten to a very dangerous level. What do you make of all this?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very sadly, I think the situation in the world is such that the Muslims, the majority of them, are trying to do their best to portray the correct image of Islam and to reach out to the non-Muslims, to explain to them, to show them that Islam actually teaches reaching out to non-Muslims. But at the same time, the few who are perpetrating crimes, they are causing a lot of this Islamophobia and this anti-Muslim rhetoric. And I would like to think that some of the less educated in some of the non-Muslim countries also feel a similar way, because those who are educated or who have interacted with Muslims, with the majority of Muslims, would know for a fact that Muslims are actually peace-loving people and they are not to be feared as such. The few who perpetrate crimes, I'm sure, in the past and even in the current day, we have people of other faiths who also perpetrate crimes. They sometimes perpetrate crimes in the name of their religion, and sometimes it's not in the name of religion. I'd like to educate, if I can, and this is what I have been doing as best as I can, the globe at large, the Muslims as well as the non-Muslims. When it comes to the Muslims, I try my best to educate them to be able to live in harmony, coexistence, to be able to tolerate those whom they may differ with, because as you know, it's only human nature and part of the human rights for people to have their own views and ideas on condition that they tolerate others who have their own views and ideas or beliefs. So I'm trying to do that, and at the same time reach out to the non-Muslims, educating them that the true Islam, the mainstream Islam that the majority of us are following, has nothing to do with this type of violent crime, or this type of crime, should I say, or violence. Yes, the job has become much more difficult, and I think people would just look at you sometimes and think automatically, put you into a box. You're with hijab, or you have a beard, or you're dressed in a specific way, or your name sounds a little bit Arabic, and that makes you a very bad person. I think we can all do more to make the world a much better place, the Muslims as well as the non-Muslims.
Now, Islamophobia and extremism, they seem to be feeding off each other. And a group of Muslims also are not helping, in the sense that they are feeding the frenzy of the fanatics, so to speak. What's your advice?
Very sadly, it's a vicious circle. It's a vicious circle in the sense that there is a blame game on at the moment. Who started this? How did it start? Who did what for this thing to happen? It wasn't the case a few decades back. And so some people say, look, this party started it, and the others say, well, the other party started it. Whoever started it, today we have a problem. And that problem is a small group of people on either side happen to be extreme. They happen to be people who are not doing anyone a favor, and at the same time they happen to be sometimes warped in the way they think. If we have a problem, for example, with a certain group of people, it does not necessarily mean that we have a problem with everyone else who doesn't belong to our faith. And the same applies if we have a problem with a small group of people within a faith. It does not mean we have a problem with the entire faith. So as you can see, it's a problem on both sides. It's an issue. And like I said earlier, if we don't cooperate and if we don't develop a team or work together to resolve this matter, it's going to be one-sided, and perhaps it will take longer to resolve this. It's very important for us all to hold hands and try and resolve this problem, to be able to live together, to be able to tolerate one another, to be able to coexist with our differences.
Now, you see, some group of Muslims, they tend to be apologetically defensive, for want of a better word, when something like this happens, And this is precisely what these jihadist groups, so to speak, want. What is your advice?
I think we have several groups that people fall into. Once, say, for example, a crime like that which happened in Belgium is perpetrated. One, you get people immediately thinking to themselves, I need to give up my faith, or I need to give up a part of my faith, or I need to, for example, abandon my hijab or remove my beard and so on. And I think that doesn't solve the problem. Studying these people perpetrating the crimes, or the pictures that, their photographs, most of them don't have beards. A lot of them would probably be in disguise when they perpetrate a crime. I've noticed that if you have a Muslim who is dressed as a Muslim, mostly he would be a proper person who's trying to follow the faith and reach out to others at the same time. When there is a criminal about to perpetrate or engage in a crime, he would disguise himself. So he would probably have a cap, shave his beard off, take the hijab off, walking through security and so on, so that nobody picks the person up. And this is the reason why whenever I've traveled, I have noticed that I don't really have a problem, in the sense that they know, what you see is what you get. If this man had something to hide, he wouldn't be dressed in this way. But that doesn't stop me from smiling, from reaching out to people, from lending a helping hand now and again, wherever it's needed. So I feel that, yes, we do have this reaction when people perpetrate the crimes. It needs to be guided on both sides, or on all sides. Guided in the sense that we shouldn't compromise our faith, we shouldn't compromise our beliefs, we shouldn't compromise what we feel is correct on all sides. If there is a person living as a Christian, he should be left to live as a Christian. If there is a person who chooses to be an atheist, he should be left to be an atheist. Yes, we will invite each other, because that is what human beings are all about, to consider the faith. I have spoken to so many non-Muslims who've asked me about my faith, and I've invited them to read, to look into it. They've asked me questions. Some of them I've answered them satisfactorily. Some of them, they were not convinced. So this is what life is all about. It doesn't mean that because he was not convinced by my words that he's an enemy. And it doesn't mean that I have spoken to him and answered his questions and so on, that makes me a bad person. So either way, we need to try and understand each other. We need to try and answer questions for each other, live together with each other, and no crime that is perpetrated by anyone should make us feel that we need to give up part of our human rights of belief, the freedom of belief and the freedom of conscience and so on. We don't have to give that up. And I think if we do give it up, the only thing that's happening is we're playing into the hands of those who want to see the eradication of either. Either the Muslims are gone totally, they've given up their faith, or those who are not Muslim have had to pretend to be Muslim and so on, just to save themselves. So may the Almighty help us all. We always pray. Together with prayer, we reach out to one another. And I think, like I said earlier, there is a lot of work to be done. And we are trying. I know I am trying. I'd like to hope that everyone else is trying as well.
Let's turn our focus to some controversial issues. What happens when you live as a minority in the larger context of a multiracial population? How do you practice your Islam? What is the brand of Islam that is accepted? Is there such a thing as a moderate Muslim? These are topics that have been coming up ever so often now.
I think let's look at the democratic countries where democracy is, the order of the day, should I say. There is a freedom for all to practice what they believe is correct. I come from Zimbabwe. The same applies there, where people are free to practice what they believe. There is a condition that you shouldn't trample on the feet of others, which means if I believe, for example, that I will eat a specific type of meat, that which is halal, yes, I'm free to do that. The law allows me to eat that which I believe is for me. If a person believes that they don't want to eat any meat at all, take a look at the Hindus, for example. They are free to abstain from what they don't believe. Nobody can force them to do something that they do not believe. They will be offended if we were to offer them something that they don't eat, and we know that they don't eat, for example, beef. So it's up to us to bear in mind the fact that they are citizens as well. They have their right to belief. They have their right to whatever they feel. And at the same time, we do not have the right to actually shove down their throats something that we feel is correct just because we do. The same applies to the Muslims. If, for example, I believe that I need to pray facing a certain direction at a specific time, we have the democratic freedom or the right of doing so. Nobody can tell me that you're not allowed to face this direction, or we're not going to allow you to face this direction and so on. It would be foolish. So to be able to live and let live, I think what has happened is people tend to look at some of these beliefs and feel that this belief is not supposed to be the right of a Muslim, and I can give you examples in a moment, they feel that this is not the right of a Muslim, but it's not trampling on anyone's toes. I give you an example of, say, the Easter break or the Christmas that we have. We all know that that is a celebration for the Christians. They will, and I'm talking here about the democratic countries where obviously everyone has rights, they will celebrate. Among the Christians, there are those who don't believe in Christmas. Those who don't believe in Christmas have no right to tell those who believe in Christmas not to celebrate, because that's their belief. But they have a right not to participate. And what people are doing, they're mistaking this, thinking that if they haven't participated, they are narrow-minded, perhaps they are extremists, perhaps they're intolerant. There is a very big difference between having a difference of opinion or difference in belief and being intolerant. Huge difference. I can be completely different from you, but I'm very tolerant of what you do. I don't hinder you. I don't stop you. I get along with you. I do a lot of business with you, perhaps. We are maybe best friends, but we differ. So the mistake that people are making is they would see the Muslims, for example, not participating in Easter or Christmas and say, well, these are Muslims that are narrow-minded because we have a few friends who are Muslims who participate in it. Well, that's their choice. They have the freedom. So we should allow people to participate or not to participate. In fact, I can take it a step further. There are people who believe it's blasphemous to do certain things. We cannot tell them not to believe that because it's their democratic right. If, for example, I were to sacrifice or slaughter a cow, for example, it would be blasphemous to the Hindus. It would be wrong for me to do it in their presence. Similarly, the Muslims have a festival where the Eid, that they sacrifice lambs and cows. It should be such that if a Muslim does that, he should never be offended when a Hindu does not participate in that, because obviously that Hindu has his beliefs. Yet the two of them may be business partners, they may be best friends, but they would respect each other. So I think the educated lot understands exactly what I'm saying, that there is a huge difference between differing in opinion and not tolerating or promoting hatred and so on. I think it's got nothing to do with promoting hatred. In fact, it's the tolerance that makes a nation. I know I was born in Zimbabwe. I've been to a Christian school. I've studied at St. John's College, a lovely college. In fact, some of my children are there right now. It has a Christian ethos. It's a Christian school. They tolerate the Muslims. They cater for them. And at the same time, I do know of Muslim schools that have Christian children. They tolerate them. They cater for them. This is what it is. Yet there are differences, sometimes major differences. When for example, when there is a Christmas party, they would not expect the Muslims to participate. Yet there will be some Muslims who don't take their religion seriously, or who may believe that the sect that we belong to allows us to do this. No problem. There's absolutely no harm. But it still doesn't mean that they have the right to shove any of their beliefs down the throats of the others. So I think if we're living in a country that is multiracial, multireligious, we have to take into consideration the fact that each person has a right. You can call it a democratic right, you can call it a human right, whatever you'd like to call it, to believe what they firmly believe inside the heart. If I believe, for example, that Christmas is wrong, I have the right to believe that maybe that nothing happened there. Like I said, there are Christians who actually believe that Christmas is more of a business thing. When I heard it the first time, I laughed at it. You know, they said it's just for business purposes, the end of the year we want to. I don't know. I didn't really go into that part of it. But when I heard it, I didn't feel hatred towards the person saying it. I tolerated it. And I do know that that's an opinion. But I still get along. I still, they're still part of the nation. They contribute to the nation and the growth of the nation together with their diversity. So this is just a point that has come to my mind. And I feel it's extremely important for us to know this and to understand it, to be able to develop as a nation. The minute we start crossing boundaries and imposing on people, look, you're not allowed to believe this anymore, You can't believe it. If you believe it, you're narrow-minded. Then we contribute towards either the destruction or the downgrading of the status of democracy that we have in the nation that we're living in.
You know, sadly, there is a group of, say, Muslims. They feel that there should be a return to the purer and more perfect form of Islam, so to speak, the traditional Islam. What do you think of that?
I think every religion, those who take the religion seriously, would definitely feel that they would like to see a purer version of the faith, Christians included, and the Jews included as well, and the Muslims included. For as long as they don't trample over the toes of others, I think that it's not a problem to be as pure as possible. It depends how you meant it, actually. Because if I would like to be pure in the sense that I want to follow Islam as it was revealed, I want to be strict with my 5 daily prayers, I want to worship God Almighty alone, I want to fast in the month of Ramadan, I want to dress, covering myself, and so on. There is no harm. In fact, that's what people might be dreaming about in all faiths, to get to the purest version of that faith. But I don't trample the toes of others. When I see others not doing exactly the way I believe it should be done, what's my reaction? That's where we differ.
Now, what happens when there is a group of minorities, say Muslims, who want to return to a purer and more perfect Islam? And they see that, okay, I don't want to partake in, say, eating with my non-Muslim friends because I don't want to eat non-halal food, or I don't want to eat next to them because they're eating non-halal food. So how does that affect integration?
I think where there is respect of one another, people would understand. And, let me look at it from a slightly different perspective, to be able to reach out to the Hindus. Because if I were to speak about Islam right now, people might think, okay, you're a Muslim, you're biased. Let's take the Hindus, for example. I have a lot of friends who happen to be of the Hindu faith. We get along very well. I'm sure they respect me. I respect them. We've had discussions on faith. I understand them much better. They understand me much better. They would know that I will never, ever feed them that which they do not believe they can eat. And at the same time, if they don't want to partake of some food, the Hindus are not just of one level. You have the Jains, for example, and the others. Among them, they respect each other because they know I differ. And you do have a few Hindus, and a growing number of Hindus, who will partake of that which they didn't used to some time back. So they might be eating beef. I know of some who do eat beef and so on. It doesn't make it right in their faith. But at the same time, it's a matter of tolerating people. So if I am to be seated with someone who's going to be eating pork and drinking alcohol and so on, they know that Muslims, would be offended if that actually happens. So it doesn't mean we're not integrating. It doesn't mean we're not tolerating. We need to respect each other in the same way that I would respect the Hindus. I'm sure they would respect me if they're educated and if they really know what tolerance is all about. Because to try and streamline everything and say, look, you can only be an acceptable Muslim if you've watered down your faith to the degree that you don't have to eat halal anymore, you can drink alcohol, you don't dress this way, then I'm sorry, that's wrong. That's actually going to create a disaster, because then you will have people who are Muslims who feel in their heart, look, myself and the laws of the land are not in sync, because they're forcing me to do something I really don't believe. I'm going to have to show that I'm with them because I'm a citizen of the land. That doesn't make sense, because if the laws stopped any faith from, say, for example, their dietary restrictions and so on, and told them that there is no longer going to be halal food here, what's going to happen? You're going to create extremists out of people who were never extremists, because people will say these people are breaking the law because they only want to eat halal and so on. I think we need to be educated. I think we need to be broader minded than we actually are seeing today on the globe. There is narrow-minded, not only in the Muslim camp, narrow-mindedness, it is on the other side as well. And we need to try and understand where it is on the other side, because what people are doing today, they look at two camps, Muslims on one side, these guys are always wrong. Non-Muslims on the other side, these guys are always right. It's not the case. Be educated, be just. We need to see if there is injustice on this side or this side. We need to understand. Let's educate ourselves. I've heard people on a high level of authority say things that I wish I could speak to them to educate them, to tell them, you know what, this is not how you look at things. This is not, for example, a reason or a cause of disunity or fragmentation of the nation. I believe, like in Zimbabwe, we have, we call it a rainbow nation. People of so many different races and so many different beliefs and so, and we get along very well. Nobody would stop me from dressing the way I do. In fact, they would respect me and I would respect them. There are people who don't want to cover themselves. Let them do that. I may discuss with them because obviously there are television programs, radio programs, people come in, they go to the churches, to the masjid, for example. They will hear, we will discuss to say, look, I suggest you cover according to what I feel. If you don't cover, this will be the problem. And they can come back and tell me, well, I believe that if you cover, then this will be the problem. And this is what life is all about. This is what human beings are all about, to discuss. And we will convince, one party will convince the other, or nobody will convince anyone. But at the same time, you're living together, you are tolerating each other, you're understanding each other. This is the Islam that we knew a long time back. And I'm sure mainstream Muslims will relate to what I'm saying.
Now, what happens when foreign preachers are put in a spotlight? Recently, some governments feel that foreign preachers, they don't know the context of the way the religion is actually practiced in a particular country, and these preachers just say what they want according to Islam, of course. But when it's taken in the context of the place you live in, it doesn't work. So they feel that these foreign preachers are a threat to their racial integration. So how do you see that?
Well, to start with, I'm no one to actually instruct the governments as to what they should or shouldn't be doing. That's always up to them. But at the same time, they need to be wise and make a decision that is enlightened. Make a decision that would be, that would have some positive impact on the nation. So if there are preachers who preach hatred and intolerance, consistently do so, and we see the negative effect of the work they're doing across the globe, for example, the government would have, meaning the government would be wise to probably put restrictions in that regard. But if we see someone whom people are saying this person is intolerant, or perhaps there was a comment that may have been taken out of context, or perhaps there was something they've said that people misunderstood, misinterpreted, yet you find a major, massive, positive impact of that particular person across the globe, and everyone seems to be learning tolerance. They seem to be learning how to live together and harmony. I think it would be foolish to actually put restrictions on such people where we think that we're doing ourselves a favor, not realizing that we're actually creating a vacuum. Creating what type of a vacuum? The vacuum would be that if, for example, such a preacher has a large following, it would only be because the preacher preaches mainstream Islam, and because if it is a wide selection, wide variety of Muslims and non-Muslims, it would definitely be indicative of the fact that this person preaches coexistence. And if we had to delete that person, there would be so many people who are looking forward to someone speaking to them some sort of sense in faith, and they've only got one of two options. One is they've got those who've watered down the faith to the degree that no one wants to listen to them because, they're known as sellouts. So someone who's telling you don't need to pray anymore, you don't need to, you have to attend this party and you have to do this and you must go and attend the Hindu functions and you must attend this function. If someone is going to, for example, water it down totally, they would lose respect in the eyes of the Muslims and no one would actually lend an ear to them. But at the same time, the other group that they have left, those who are extreme, because today you go to Google, you search what you want, and the next thing you know, you're hearing some form of extreme people preaching. Sometimes the way they do it in such a way that, people start nodding their heads and saying, wow, yes, I agree with this. So instead of creating a vacuum, let's have, middle pathed people. And this is what the Quran teaches us, to be following the middle path. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also has said on more than one occasion that the best course is the middle course, the middle path. Be moderate in matters. Moderation here does not mean giving up faith, but what it does mean is to be able to practice your faith in a way that you are lenient with others who practice another faith, and so on. So I feel that yes, we can solve this matter, but in a wise way.
Let me take you up on this. You've just mentioned Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of the bones of contention is the fact that, okay, we have one sector celebrating the Mawlid and the other sector not celebrating the Mawlid. And very often, sadly, the preacher is being put in a spot because this preacher says, you shouldn't be celebrating it, or you should be celebrating it, and that becomes an issue. What happens here?
I think let's be fair. Let those who want to do it go ahead, and those who don't want to do it, abstain from it. As simple as that. Those who believe it's a good idea, please explain to people that it's a good idea and why. And those who believe it's a bad idea, please go ahead and explain to the people that it's a bad idea and why. But let's not start pointing fingers at each other. I feel that one of the causes of extremism is when we start labeling each other as Muslims kafir. Someone disagrees with you and they call you a kafir. I think that's the beginning of a huge problem because it sows the seeds of hatred. In what sense? In Islam, when you call someone who was Muslim a kafir, it really means perhaps this person is now engaged in apostasy. Perhaps they have reneged from the faith and so on. And some people might misinterpret the laws of the Sharia, take it in their own hands and attack such a person. So I believe that if people do call another person a kafir, it gives way to creating a huge problem. And if you want to ask, for example, or someone may ask that, well, who does this? I think from all parties, there are people who are guilty. And this is why a person like myself, I get along with people who are from all different sects on condition that they are mainstream. Mainstream meaning we tolerate each other. We have, as you know, we have the Sufis, we have the Sunnis, we have the Hanafis, the Shafi'is, whoever else, we have the Salafis, we have so many different people and sects. In fact, I can't even count, there are so many sects. But we get along with each other on condition that we're mainstream. The minute one says, this person's a total kafir, that's it. What happens? That is the root. So I remember when I was young, when I was much younger, we had a group of Sunnis. Sunnis, each one calls themselves a name. So some call them Sufis, some say Sunnis and so on. Yes, and some are moderate, some are not, some are extreme. And you had a group who always said everyone else who doesn't believe that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is omnipresent, is a kafir. They wouldn't greet, they wouldn't eat the meat, they wouldn't participate, and the numbers have grown. What about them? They have promoted their faith in a way that everyone else is an enemy. Their faith is based on curse. If that's the case, we need to solve the matter. The same applies on the other hand. Those who want to purify the deen, yes, they have every right to believe it's wrong to do this and wrong to do that. They even have the right to preach. But do they have the right to start labeling people a kafir, for example? I don't greet you, I don't look at you, I don't talk to you. When then are you going to be able to promote what you believe? Like as a Muslim, a mainstream Muslim, for example, I would love to seize every opportunity to reach out to those who don't think like me, or those perhaps who are not Muslim. Reach out to them in a beautiful way. They are invited to Islam just by my interaction, without even me saying a word. Sometimes they ask me a question. And that question, the answer of it, sometimes is so powerful that they begin to scratch their heads and they say, I've never looked at it this way. I didn't know Muslims thought this way. So it's an opportunity to clear the mind. But if I look at them as enemies in the way that, this person, I'm not going to greet them, I'm not going to talk to them, I think we're defeating the purpose. That is what is the root of intolerance. Whenever I travel, I make it a point to greet people. So if we greet the non-Muslims, what about the others who are Muslim? This is where I never see the sense in this. We greet the non-Muslims, but when it comes to a Muslim of another sect, we don't want to greet them. We don't want to acknowledge them. We feel that this person here should be, attacked. And what has happened as a result is now that the nations are, and this is a very important point, now that the nations are combating ISIS, and now that the nations are concerned about security, they would rely on information from Muslims about what's going on, common sense. So some of the Muslims are sadly seizing the opportunity to use the governments to nail somebody they disagree with. That's it. Or they're jealous of. So if I have a gripe, I say, oh, wow, right. Now I'm happy because I'm going to tell the government this person is this and that, and they're a threat to the peace and stability of this. It's not because they are a threat, because the government's asking me, and I'm telling them that, look, just block this guy, stop this guy. You know, these are the bad people, but they're not the bad people. And I think this is what's going on in a lot of countries. I mean, I've studied some situations in Western nations, and I've seen little groups of Muslims crop up and lie against other Muslims. Just say that these people are bad, they're extremists, their beliefs are the root of all evil and so on, and they are not. In fact, themselves, they would be so bad in their extreme form, and they are present within themselves. So I think governments need to really become aware of the fact that this internal politics among Muslims must not divert them from what is right. That's what I feel.
Explain to us, what is a Wahhabi? This term is being bandied all over, and everybody who doesn't believe, what I believe in is a Wahhabi. Just what is a Wahhabi?
I think, as you just said, I'll take the last part of what you said, that everyone who doesn't believe in what I believe in is a Wahhabi. That's what it's come to. So what a Wahhabi actually is has become irrelevant, because today if I disagree with you, there is a dua after the salah that is said in a lot of places. In fact, all Muslims say it. The difference is how it should be said. Allahumma anta salam. It's something the Muslims would know. After the prayer, there is a little dhikr, or whatever you'd like to call it, a dua. Everyone agrees that yes, there is a place for it immediately after the prayer, and there is a specific way that it should be read. But in fact, whether it should be in congregation or singularly is a question. So I found those who say that, okay, we want to do it singularly, they would attack those who do it collectively, and those who do it collectively would attack those who do it singularly. Yet they're all reading the same dua. I believe those who want to say it, aloud, it's up to them. I might believe they're wrong. To be honest with you, I may believe that, look, it's not the ideal way of doing things, but I cannot suddenly just label them and start, promoting hatred against them. I don't greet them and so on. And what's happened is this group will call the other one Wahhabi. These are Wahhabis. Yet that's not the case.
But why is it so petty? It's the same dua.
Yes, well, it's become petty over time, and I think it's the way we've dealt with it on either side that has actually caused the problem. I may be wrong, but that's what I feel. Similarly, getting back to this Wahhabi thing, in essence, just to educate the people, there was a reviver of the religion of Islam. When we say reviver, we mean one who came forth and said, look, we've added too much into the faith, and let's try and revive it by going back to the pure form of Islam. Like I said, all religions have this. So you have among the Christians, among the Jews, among the Hindus, those who try to revive the pure version of that faith. So there was a man by the name of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. He happened to be in the Middle East, in the Arabian Peninsula, what we would call Saudi Arabia today, Hijaz at the time, right? And when he came in, he was quite strict in the way he did things. So he wanted to purify the faith. And when people differed, he obviously was very hard in the way he changed things. He had authority because he teamed up with one of the political figures, and the two together happened to go and correct people where they were wrong in terms of faith. So as a result, Al-Wahhab is a name of Allah. It means the giver of gifts, the one who gives. So if we say Al-Wahhab, it's actually a name of Allah. But if we say Wahhabi, it's supposed to be connected to this particular person and the way he purified things and so on. However, the term Wahhabi today is used to refer to anyone who does things that our forefathers didn't do. Or should I say, anyone who does things against what our forefathers did. Like, for example, you raise the issue of the Mawlid, for example. If a person does it, it's one of those things. It's probably come from the forefathers. If a person doesn't do it, immediately they'll say Wahhabi. But there are so many people who say we're not Wahhabis, but we believe that we won't do this. It's like music, for example. There are distinct opinions when it comes to music, with the vast majority of mainstream Muslims across the globe actually believing that anything besides drums is not supposed to be. But at the same time, we do have culturally a lot of music has come in, and people have brought it in, and there is an opinion that allows a certain degree of it. Now, when someone says music is not allowed, they just say Wahhabi. But there are so many Sufis, non-Wahhabis, people who are not even Muslim, who say, you know what, music has become so dirty, we don't even want to listen to it anymore. I mean, I heard someone saying music industry has become worse than the porn industry. I don't know, but that's what they're saying. It's their right. It doesn't make them Wahhabis. So people have now, used that term to refer to anyone they disagree with. And this is why I said, like I said earlier, in this particular age, we need to be careful of people who label others. Why? Because they are perhaps labeling them out of hatred, not necessarily that that person belongs to the group they are being labeled with, but it's just out of hatred or out of an opportunity to get them out of the way. As you know, there is competition in any faith with the sects within that faith. You have the Protestants, you have the Catholics. I know of a person who told me the Catholics are not Christians. It's Catholicism. It's got nothing to do with Christianity. Well, maybe those are the Wahhabis of Christianity. So I was looking at them and thinking, well, look, I'm a Muslim. And I know even amongst Muslims, there are Muslims who say, well, those guys are not Muslims and so on. So I guess it must be something of that nature. But to be honest, we need to be careful. Not everyone who we think belongs to a certain sect actually belongs to that sect. Sometimes it's just a person who has thrown this particular name because they want to seize the opportunity to do away with them, seeing that the globe is where it is today.
Now, despite all this doom and gloom message, that's going all around, Islam is still the fastest growing religion in the world. Why is it so?
You know what? I always leave that to the Almighty. In reality, it's... let me give you a case that happened. I was sitting next to a female on one of my flights, and she happened to talk to me. And I think she found the discussion very engaging, and she started asking me questions. And I began to respond, and at the end she said, I never looked at Islam this way. I didn't even invite her to Islam. All I did was answer her questions. And I think what's happening across the globe with so much of Islamophobia, people want to know the truth. They want to know exactly what Islam is all about. So when they get the opportunity to interact with real Muslims, they will ask a question. When they hear the answer, they will see this is not exactly what I've thought or believed all along. Where I got it from was either the media or someone who hates Islam or whatever else. And here I've got a response that makes a lot of sense. So it draws them a little bit nearer. And a lot of the times you find they will study the faith, and they may feel that the problems that the globe is facing, we have issues of drugs, we have issues of pornography, we have immorality, we have marriages breaking, we have so much of, so many crises, even of a financial nature. And when you study Islam, it has the solution for all of that. So now people begin to understand why Islam, teaches stricter dress code, why it has a specific type of financial rules and regulations, why it has specific dietary requirements. So when they begin to see the light, they start thinking to themselves, you know what, all these problems that we're facing, Islam being as strict as it is, actually solves the problem. You have people in happier homes, people who are dedicated, perhaps more faithful, perhaps dressed in a way that they're not enslaved by the rest of those who would like to enslave them and so on. So I'd like to think that that's the will of the Almighty.
What's your message for the Ummah in these very trying times?
I think the message that I have for the Ummah is to be able to reach out to everyone within the faith, those who don't think exactly like you. We need to reach out to them. Even outside the faith, those who perhaps have beliefs that are taboo, we need to reach out to them. I had recently, I met a gay couple. And the interesting thing was, I actually spoke to them. And I spoke to them about Islam, they spoke to me about what they had, and they were really so happy that they got to talk to a Muslim. And I was happy that I got to speak to people who heard what I had to say, and I heard what they had to say. It was very, very unique in the sense that many years back, having been born and brought up in Zimbabwe, obviously we never ever interacted with gays. So as I grew older and I happened to interact a little bit more, initially it was a little bit of, it was difficult because, like anyone who's not used to something or who's never ever been in interaction with a certain type of people, they would feel a little bit uneasy. But at the same time, yes, as you develop and as you grow, it's just like a Christian, it's just like a Jewish person, it's a person who's chosen to be atheist. Initially, when I heard about atheists, I would think, well, people don't believe in God, how can that be? As we grew older, we interacted with them, we heard what they had to say, we had opportunities to respond or to explain, and they had opportunities to explain. We are still different, but we tolerate each other. We may never agree with one another. We may be strong in our opinions. Those are not weak qualities, those are good qualities. To be strong in your view, a leader is strong in his view a lot of the times, and he knows. But he has to be tolerant of people with a different opinion. So I'd like to say that it matures all of us to be able to interact with people. Not that I believe this is right or this is wrong. I think everyone should have the freedom to choose what they believe is right or wrong. The minute we say you no longer have that freedom to choose, I think we're heading in the wrong direction. I think that would cause a disaster. And I think that's where some disasters have been caused already, and some are in the making, because we've got to a stage where we tell people you're not allowed to believe what you're believing. You can't believe that this is wrong. If I want to believe, for example, that another faith is wrong, I have the right. Every faith believes they are the faith that is right. That's what the world is all about. The minute I say, no, you no longer can believe that the other faiths are actually wrong, what am I doing? Am I trying to remove faith from earth? It's not going to happen, because it's ingrained within humankind. They need to believe something. There are a lot of unanswered questions that only religion can bring in, and it actually helps you go through the trials and tribulations of life. So I think we need to learn to tolerate one another, reach out to one another. Let's be mature about things. Let's educate one another in a good way. When we disagree, it doesn't mean that we hate each other or we become intolerant of each other. That's the disagreement. Let's learn to live with the disagreement in harmony. And I can end with an example, a beautiful example, where if you take a look at any nation, the civil service, for example, the civil servants belong to diverse faiths. What are they doing? They're trying to build the nation. Take a look at Singapore, for example. You have Muslims who have served the nation dedicatedly, and they pray 5 times a day. And they have contributed to the nation perhaps more than people who are not Muslim. And it's amazing, because we have to acknowledge this. And it's been going on for decades, not just now. So if we start saying, no, the Muslims did nothing and they didn't contribute, we would actually be foolish. They did. Let's appreciate them. Let's allow them. They've believed what they have believed all along, and they've served the nation, and the nation has grown because of that. And the same applies to most other nations. But we tend to come sometime and to say, you know what, no, you're no longer allowed to do this and that, and you can't. Come on. Let's try and tolerate each other. Let's learn to appreciate what we've done for one another in the past, and the fact that it will continue on condition that we also continue to love one another beautifully. We have husband and wife relations, we have relations of parents and children. They don't always agree. And sometimes they have strong disagreements, but they love each other. They get along. They cannot do without each other in those instances. I hope that message would actually move a few people, starting with myself, to do more good, because I always believe there's room for improvement, no matter how high or how close to perfection you may feel you have got. I still feel there's room for improvement.
Mufti Menk, thank you very much for your time. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.